The evening sky was painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun began its slow descent behind the hills. The air was cool, carrying a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of tall oak trees lining the streets of Oakwood Estates. This was an exclusive neighborhood, where every house was a mansion surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges and wrought iron gates. It was the kind of place people dreamed about living in, a symbol of wealth, success, and privilege. Maya Johnson had worked her entire life to reach this moment. Born into a modest family in a small town, she had faced countless challenges growing up. Her parents always told her that education was her ticket out of hardship, so Maya poured herself into her studies. She earned scholarships, worked multiple jobs, and eventually graduated at the top of her class. Over the years, she built a successful career as a business consultant, helping struggling companies turn their fortunes around. Her hard work paid off, and recently, she fulfilled one of her biggest dreams, buying a mansion in Oakwood Estates. As Maya pulled into the driveway of her new home, she couldn't help but smile. The mansion stood proudly before her, its grand architecture illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. She stepped out of her sleek black SUV, dressed casually in jeans and a cozy sweater. For a moment, she paused to take it all in, the manicured lawn, the sparkling windows, the sense of accomplishment washing over her. It felt surreal, almost like stepping into a movie scene. But her peaceful moment didn't last long. As she walked toward the front door with her keys in hand, she noticed two police officers approaching her. They were dressed in full uniform, their expressions serious and unsmiling. One of them held a flashlight while the other rested his hand on the holster of his gun. Maya stopped in her tracks, surprised by their sudden appearance. "Ma'am, can you explain what you're doing here?" one of the officers asked, his voice sharp and demanding. His tone caught Maya off guard. She blinked, trying to process why they were questioning her. After all, this was her property, her home. "I live here," she replied calmly, gesturing toward the mansion. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of confusion in her tone. Why would anyone think she didn't belong here? The officers exchanged glances, their skepticism evident. "You live here?" one of them repeated, raising an eyebrow. There was something dismissive in the way he said it, as if he already doubted her answer. Maya felt a pang of unease in her chest. She wasn't imagining things. Their demeanor suggested they didn't believe her. "This is my house," she clarified, keeping her tone polite despite the tension building inside her. "I just bought it." The officers weren't satisfied. Instead of accepting her explanation, they pressed further. "Do you have any proof of ownership?" one of them asked, his arms crossed. Maya hesitated for a moment. Of course, she had proof, but she hadn't expected to need it right then and there. Who walks around carrying their house deed in their pocket? Still, she nodded. "Yes, I can show you. Let me get it from inside." Before she could move, the other officer interrupted. "Hold on a second," he said, his tone firmer now. "We'll need to see some ID first." He reached for his radio, as if preparing to call for backup. Maya's heart sank. This wasn't just a routine check, it was something more, something deeper. She handed over her driver's license without hesitation. When the officers examined it, their expressions grew even more suspicious. Her address on the license still listed her old apartment downtown, not the mansion. "This doesn't match the location," one of them pointed out, his voice tinged with accusation. Maya sighed inwardly. She knew exactly what was happening. If she were white, driving a luxury car, or wearing designer clothes, would they be treating her this way? Probably not. "I recently moved," she explained patiently. "I haven't updated my license yet, but I assure you, I own this house." Despite her calm demeanor, the officers continued to question her relentlessly. They asked how much she paid for the property, who sold it to her, and whether she could provide documentation immediately. Each question seemed designed to trip her up, to catch her in a lie. But Maya stayed composed, refusing to let frustration get the better of her. By now, neighbors had started to notice the commotion. Some peeked through their curtains, curious about the scene unfolding outside the mansion. Others came closer, pretending to take a casual stroll, but clearly eavesdropping. Maya could feel their eyes on her, judging her, scrutinizing her presence in a neighborhood where she was supposed to belong. It was humiliating, infuriating, and yet she refused to back down. Deep down, Maya understood that this wasn't really about a missing piece of paper or outdated information on her ID. It was about assumptions based on the color of her skin. These officers had judged her before giving her a chance to speak. And as much as it hurt, she vowed not to let their prejudice define her. She would prove them wrong, not just for herself but for anyone else who might face similar treatment in the future. With quiet determination, Maya unlocked the front door and invited the officers inside to retrieve the deed. Little did they know this simple act would expose their biases and force them to confront the uncomfortable truth about their actions. Maya stood in the doorway of her mansion, holding it open for the two officers who hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Their boots clicked against the marble floor, echoing through the grand foyer. The interior of the house was breathtaking. Crystal, chandeliers hung from high ceilings, intricate crown molding framed the walls, and plush rugs added warmth to the polished surfaces. It was clear that this was no ordinary home. It belonged to someone with taste, sophistication, and financial means, but none of that seemed to matter to the officers. As they followed Maya into the house, their skepticism only deepened. One of them glanced around dismissively as if searching for signs that she didn't belong here. "Where's the deed?" he asked abruptly, his tone clipped and impatient. Maya ignored the rudeness, leading them toward her study without saying a word. She knew exactly where the document was. It had been one of the first things she unpacked after moving in. As they walked, the officers continued firing questions at her, each one more intrusive than the last. "How much did you pay for this place?" one of them demanded. Maya stopped for a second, turning to face him. Her expression was calm but firm. "That's personal information," she replied evenly. "It has nothing to do with whether I own this house or not." The officer frowned, clearly annoyed by her refusal to play along. "Look, ma'am," he said, his voice rising slightly. "We're just trying to verify your story. You understand, don't you? People sometimes pretend to live in places like this when they don't actually own them." Maya felt a surge of anger bubbling beneath the surface, but she forced herself to stay composed. "Are you suggesting I'm lying?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. Before either officer could respond, she continued walking, determined to end this farce as quickly as possible. When they reached the study, Maya opened a sleek wooden cabinet and retrieved the deed. She handed it over silently, watching as the officers examined it closely. At first glance, everything appeared legitimate: the signatures, the seals, the property description, but they weren't ready to admit defeat yet. "We'll need to check this against public records," one of them muttered, pulling out his radio. While they waited for confirmation, Maya leaned against the edge of her desk, arms crossed. She studied the men carefully, noting the subtle shift in their body language. They looked uncomfortable now, unsure of how to proceed. For the first time since their arrival, there was silence between them, a stark contrast to the barrage of accusations moments earlier. The tension in the room was palpable. Maya couldn't help but replay the events in her mind. If she had been white, would they have treated her differently? Would they have believed her immediately instead of doubting her every word? These thoughts gnawed at her, reminding her of all the times she had faced similar discrimination throughout her life. From being underestimated in meetings to being followed in stores, she knew what it felt like to be judged based on her race rather than her actions. Eventually, the radio crackled to life, breaking the silence. A dispatcher confirmed that the deed matched public records. The mansion indeed belonged to Maya Johnson. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their faces flushed with embarrassment. "Well, it seems everything checks out," one of them stammered, handing the document back to her. "Sorry for the inconvenience." Maya accepted the apology with a tight smile, though she wasn't convinced it came from genuine remorse. To her, it felt rehearsed, almost automatic, as if they were following protocol rather than truly acknowledging their mistake. Inconvenience was putting it mildly. What they had done went beyond mere inconvenience. It was a violation of her dignity and rights as a homeowner. Before she could say anything further, the officers excused themselves, muttering something about needing to get back to patrol. Maya watched them leave, her jaw tightening as she heard their car drive away. She closed the front door behind them and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. The confrontation may have ended, but its impact lingered. Upstairs, neighbors continued to watch curiously from their windows. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about what had happened. Others approached cautiously, offering hesitant smiles and introductions. "Welcome to the neighborhood," one older woman said warmly, though her gaze betrayed a hint of curiosity. Maya thanked her politely, aware that news of the incident would spread quickly. That night, as Maya sat alone in her living room, she reflected on the day's events. The luxurious surroundings offered little comfort as she replayed the scene. In her mind, why had those officers assumed she didn't belong here? Was it because of her casual attire, her race, or simply the fact that they couldn't fathom a black woman owning such an expensive property? She thought about the countless barriers she had overcome to reach this point in her life, from struggling to make ends meet during college to battling stereotypes in boardrooms dominated by men. She had fought hard for every achievement. Buying this mansion was supposed to be a celebration of her success, a testament to her resilience and determination. Instead, it had become another reminder of the systemic racism she faced daily. Despite her frustration, Maya refused to let bitterness consume her. She had always believed in using adversity as fuel for growth, and this situation was no different. As she stared out the window at the quiet street below, an idea began to form in her mind. Maybe this incident could serve a greater purpose, not just for her, but for others who had experienced similar injustices. With renewed resolve, Maya picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. She typed out a quick message. "Can we talk tomorrow? There's something important I want to discuss." Within minutes, she received a reply. "Of course. Let's meet for coffee at 10. Satisfied, Maya set her phone down and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be a new day, filled with opportunities to turn this negative experience into something positive. For now, she allowed herself a small victory, proving to those officers, and anyone else who doubted her, that she belonged exactly where she was, and no amount of prejudice could change that. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maya's mansion, casting golden patterns across the marble floors. Birds chirped outside, their melodies blending with the faint hum of the neighborhood coming to life. It was a peaceful start to what promised to be an eventful day. Maya sipped her coffee slowly, her mind replaying the events of the previous evening. The sting of discrimination still lingered, but it had transformed into something else. A quiet determination to turn this personal injustice into a broader conversation. After finishing her cup, she grabbed her bag and headed out for her meeting. Her destination was a cozy cafe nestled in the heart of downtown, known for its warm atmosphere and strong espresso. As she entered, she spotted her friend and confidant, Rachel Monroe, already seated at a corner table. Rachel was a journalist, with years of experience covering social justice issues, and Maya knew she could trust her to handle this story responsibly. "Hey," Rachel greeted her warmly, sliding a steaming latte across the table. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind." Maya smiled faintly as she sat down. "That's one way to put it," she said, taking a sip of her drink. For a moment, they exchanged pleasantries, talking about work, weather, and other trivialities, but Maya soon shifted gears. She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Rachel, I need your help. Something happened last night that I think people should know about." Rachel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Okay, tell me everything." And so, Maya recounted the entire incident, the officer's accusatory tone, their refusal to believe, her ownership of the house, and the humiliating questions they asked. Rachel listened intently, her pen poised over her notebook as she jotted down key details. When Maya finished speaking, Rachel let out a low whistle. Wow, she said softly. That's infuriating. It's more than infuriating, Maya replied, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. It's systemic. Those officers didn't just question me because I'm black. They questioned me because I'm black. If I were white, none of this would have happened. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. So what do you want to do about it? Maya hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I want to share my story, not just to call out those officers, but to highlight the bigger issue here. Racial profiling isn't new, but maybe if enough people hear about it and see how absurd it is, we can push for change. Rachel's eyes lit up with understanding. A public statement, she said. Are you sure? You're ready for that? Once this goes public, there's no turning back. I know, Maya said firmly. But staying silent won't fix anything either. Besides, I've worked too hard to let someone else define who I am or where I belong. If sharing my experience helps even one person feel less alone, then it's worth it. Convinced by Maya's conviction, Rachel agreed to help craft the narrative. Over the next hour, they discussed how best to present the story, how to balance raw emotion with factual clarity, how to appeal to both empathy and logic. By the time they left the cafe, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about amplifying voices that had long been ignored. Later that afternoon, Maya met with Rachel again, this time at her office. They spent hours reviewing drafts of the article, tweaking sentences and adding context. Rachel included statistics about racial profiling in law enforcement, quotes from civil rights advocates, and insights from legal experts. The piece wasn't just Maya's story. It was a call to action, urging readers to confront the biases embedded in institutions meant to protect them. As the article neared completion, Maya couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability creeping in. Sharing such a personal experience required courage, especially knowing that not everyone would respond positively. Some might dismiss her account as exaggerated or irrelevant, while others might accuse her of seeking attention. But every time doubt crept in, Maya reminded herself why she was doing this: to challenge stereotypes, spark dialogue, and advocate for systemic reform. Finally, the article was published online late that evening. Within minutes, it began gaining traction. Social media platforms buzzed with reactions, some supportive, others critical. But the overwhelming response was one of solidarity. People shared their own stories of being profiled, harassed, or discriminated against. Strangers flooded Maya's inbox with messages of encouragement, thanking her for speaking out and validating their experiences. One message stood out to Maya in particular. It came from a young woman named Jasmine, who described growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood and constantly feeling like an outsider. Reading your story made me realize I'm not alone, Jasmine wrote. Thank you for having the courage to stand up and say what so many of us are afraid to admit. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she read the note. For all the negativity surrounding racism, moments like these reminded her of the power of collective action. Change might not happen overnight, but every voice added to the chorus brought society one step closer to equality. Meanwhile, the article caught the attention of local news outlets, which reached out to Maya for interviews. At first, she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her forte, but Rachel encouraged her to embrace the opportunity. This is your platform, Rachel said. Use it wisely. Maya agreed, appearing on several television shows and radio programs over the following days. Each interview followed a similar pattern. She recounted the incident calmly, emphasized the need for accountability, and called for reforms within law enforcement. Her poise and eloquence resonated with viewers, earning her widespread admiration. Not everyone supported her efforts, however. Critics accused her of exaggerating the situation or using race as a weapon. One commenter wrote, "Why does everything have to be about race? Maybe the cops were just doing their job." Such comments frustrated Maya, but she refused to engage with negativity. Instead, she focused on the positive impact her story was creating. Behind the scenes, Maya also filed a formal complaint against the officers involved, requesting an internal investigation into their conduct. She knew holding individuals accountable was only part of the solution. The real challenge lay in addressing the systemic issues enabling such behavior in the first place. By the end of the week, the story had gone viral, sparking discussions nationwide. Community leaders organized town hall meetings to address racial profiling, inviting residents, activists, and police representatives to participate. Maya attended one such meeting, sitting alongside others who had faced similar injustices. Together, they shared ideas for improving community-police relations, including mandatory bias training and increased transparency. As Maya listened to the diverse voices around her, she realized something profound. Her individual struggle had become a collective movement. What started as a humiliating encounter outside her mansion had evolved into a catalyst for change, uniting people from different backgrounds under a common goal. Walking home that evening, Maya paused beneath the same oak tree where the officers had confronted her days earlier. The air was cooler now, carrying the promise of autumn. She looked up at the sky, feeling a mix of emotions: pride, exhaustion, hope. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She had taken a stand, and that was a victory in itself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fight for justice. But for tonight, Maya allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing she had planted seeds of change that would continue to grow long after the headlines faded. The days following the publication of Maya's story were a whirlwind of emotions, media attention, and public discourse. The article had struck a nerve nationwide, sparking debates in living rooms, workplaces, and online forums. For many, it was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the racial biases that still permeated society. For others, it was an uncomfortable truth they preferred to ignore. But for Maya, it was personal. Every comment, every interview, every conversation brought her face to face with the reality she had always known, but rarely discussed publicly. One evening, after another long day of interviews and meetings, Maya returned home to find her phone buzzing incessantly. Notifications poured in from social media platforms, emails flooded her inbox, and text messages lit up her screen. Most were supportive, filled with words of encouragement and gratitude. Yet scattered among them were harsh criticisms, accusations that she was exaggerating, seeking attention, or playing the race card. One message read, "You're making a big deal out of nothing. Cops are just doing their jobs." Maya sighed as she scrolled through the comments. She had expected backlash, but seeing it laid bare in black and white text was exhausting. Still, she refused to let negativity overshadow the progress being made. Instead, she focused on the positive responses, the countless stories shared by people who felt seen and heard because of her courage. A young man named Marcus wrote, "Your story inspired me to speak up about my own experience with racial profiling. Thank you for giving me the strength to tell my truth." These messages reminded Maya why she had chosen to share her story in the first place. It wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about creating space for conversations that mattered. Each voice added to the growing chorus demanding change, and Maya took comfort in knowing she wasn't alone in this fight. The next morning, Maya attended a press conference organized by local civil rights organizations. Representatives from various groups gathered to discuss systemic racism within law enforcement and propose solutions. Maya sat at the center of the panel, flanked by activists, lawyers, and community leaders. Cameras flashed as reporters jotted down notes, eager to capture every word spoken. When it was her turn to speak, Maya stood confidently, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident," she began. "It's part of a larger pattern, a pattern rooted in prejudice and reinforced by silence. When those officers questioned my ownership of my home, they weren't just doubting me, they were doubting my worth as a human being. And I'm not the only one who's experienced this." She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze lingered on the faces of those listening intently, some nodding in agreement, others visibly moved. We can't fix what we refuse to acknowledge, she continued. If we truly want to build safer, fairer communities, we need accountability, we need transparency, and most importantly, we need to challenge the biases that allow discrimination to persist. Her words resonated deeply, earning applause from the audience. As she stepped back to her seat, she noticed several officers sitting quietly in the back row. They wore plain clothes, blending into the crowd, but their presence didn't go unnoticed. Maya wondered if they were there to learn, or to defend themselves against accusations leveled against their profession. Either way, she hoped they left with more questions than answers. Later that week, Maya received a formal response from the police department regarding her complaint. In a brief statement, they apologized for the officer's conduct and announced plans to implement new training programs aimed at addressing implicit bias. While the apology was appreciated, Maya knew it wasn't enough. Training sessions alone wouldn't erase decades of ingrained prejudice. What was needed was a fundamental shift in mindset, a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and hold individuals accountable for their actions. Determined to keep pushing for meaningful change, Maya joined forces with advocacy groups to draft policy recommendations for local government officials. Among these proposals were measures to increase diversity within law enforcement agencies, establish independent oversight committees to investigate misconduct, and mandate regular audits of policing practices. Maya presented these ideas during a city council meeting, urging elected leaders to prioritize reform. "We have an opportunity here," she told the council members. "This isn't just about fixing broken systems. It's about rebuilding trust between communities and the people sworn to protect them. If we don't act now, we risk perpetuating the same cycles of injustice." Her impassioned plea garnered widespread support, with several council members pledging to champion the proposed reforms. Outside the chamber, protesters held signs reading, "Justice starts here" and "Accountability matters," their chants echoing through the streets. Maya felt a surge of hope as she watched the scene unfold. Change might be slow, but it was happening, and she was determined to stay involved every step of the way. Despite the progress, Maya couldn't escape the lingering effects of the incident. At night, when the house grew quiet, memories of the confrontation would resurface. She replayed the officers' accusatory tones, their dismissive glances, and the humiliation she had felt standing outside her own home. These thoughts often kept her awake, forcing her to confront the emotional toll of speaking out. To cope, Maya leaned on her support system, friends, family, and fellow advocates who understood the weight of her journey. Rachel, in particular, became a constant source of encouragement. "You're doing incredible work," Rachel told her one evening over dinner. "But remember, it's okay to take breaks. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders." Maya smiled gratefully. "I know," she said, "but sometimes it feels like if I stop, no one else will pick up where I left off." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "That's why we're here, to help share the load. Let us support you, Maya. You've already done so much." Those words stayed with Maya long after their meal ended. They reminded her that while the fight for justice required perseverance, it also demanded self-care. She couldn't pour from an empty cup, and taking care of herself was essential to sustaining her efforts. As weeks turned into months, Maya began to notice subtle shifts in her neighborhood. Neighbors who had once kept their distance now greeted her warmly, some even inviting her to community events. Others expressed regret for not intervening sooner, admitting they had witnessed the officers' behavior but hesitated to speak up. While Maya appreciated their attempts at reconciliation, she gently reminded them that allyship required action, not just apologies. "You don't have to agree with everything I say," she told a group of residents during a casual gathering. "But what matters is that you stand up when something feels wrong. Silence can be just as harmful as prejudice." Her message resonated with many, inspiring them to join local initiatives promoting inclusivity and equality. Together, they organized workshops, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns aimed at fostering understanding across racial lines. Slowly but surely, Oakwood Estates began transforming, not just in appearance but in spirit. One crisp autumn afternoon, Maya stood on her front porch, watching children play in the cul-de-sac. Their laughter filled the air, a sound so pure and unburdened. For a moment she allowed herself to imagine a future where such innocence wasn't marred by fear or prejudice, a world where everyone could live without having to prove their worth. It was a lofty dream, perhaps, but one worth striving for. Maya knew the road ahead would be challenging, fraught with obstacles and setbacks. But she also knew that change started small, with acts of courage, conversations that challenged norms, and hearts willing to listen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Maya smiled softly. She had come a long way since that tense evening outside her mansion, and though the scars of discrimination remained, she carried them not as burdens but as reminders of her resilience. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities to push for justice. But for tonight, Maya chose to savor the peace around her, knowing she had planted seeds of hope that would continue to grow long after the headlines faded. Months had passed since the night Maya Johnson stood outside her mansion, facing down two skeptical police officers who questioned her right to be there. What began as a humiliating encounter had grown into something far greater, a movement for accountability and reform. But Maya's journey was far from over. The more she spoke out, the more she realized how deeply entrenched racial biases were in society. Her story had opened doors, but it also revealed just how much work remained to dismantle those barriers. One chilly November morning, Maya woke up early, as she always did. She brewed herself a cup of coffee and settled by the window overlooking her front yard. The trees were bare now, their branches reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. It was a quiet moment, one that allowed her to reflect on everything that had transpired since that fateful evening. The media attention had died down, but the conversations sparked by her courage continued to ripple through communities nationwide. People were talking, not just about her experience, but about their own encounters with discrimination. Today, however, was special. Maya had been invited to speak at a national conference on social justice hosted in the heart of the city. Activists, policymakers, academics, and everyday citizens would gather to discuss ways to combat systemic racism and promote equality. For Maya, this was an opportunity to amplify her message on a larger stage, one where her voice could reach even further. By mid-morning, Maya arrived at the convention center, its towering glass facade reflecting the gray November sky. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Attendees milled about, exchanging ideas, sharing stories, and networking. Posters lined the walls, displaying powerful slogans like "Equity over excuses" and "Justice is everyone's responsibility." Maya felt a sense of pride seeing so many people united under a common cause. She was scheduled to deliver the keynote address, a daunting task given the size and diversity of the audience. As she waited backstage, she reviewed her notes one last time. Her speech wasn't just about recounting her personal experience, it was about connecting individual struggles to broader systemic issues. She wanted to inspire action, not just empathy. When her name was called, Maya stepped onto the stage, greeted by thunderous applause. The spotlight illuminated her face as she approached the podium, her posture confident despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. She took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of faces before her, and began to speak. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you all for being here today, for showing up, for listening, and most importantly, for caring. When I first decided to share my story, I didn't know what to expect. Would anyone listen? Would anything change? All I knew was that staying silent wasn't an option." She paused, letting her words sink in. What happened to me wasn't unique. It was a symptom of a much larger problem, a problem rooted in assumptions, stereotypes, and fear. Those officers didn't question me because they thought I might be breaking the law. They questioned me because of the color of my skin. And while their actions hurt, what hurt more was realizing how normalized this kind of treatment is for so many people. The crowd listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others visibly moved. Maya continued, "But here's the thing. We can't fix what we refuse to acknowledge. If we want to create a fairer, safer world, We need to confront these biases head-on. We need to challenge ourselves and others to see beyond preconceived notions. We need to demand accountability from institutions that perpetuate inequality. And above all, we need to stand together, united in our pursuit of justice. Her voice grew stronger as she shifted gears, offering concrete steps individuals could take to drive change. Start by educating yourself, she urged. Read books, attend workshops, have difficult conversations with friends and family. Advocate for policies that promote equity and inclusion. Support organizations working tirelessly to dismantle systemic racism. And if you witness injustice, whether big or small, don't stay silent. Speak up, because your voice matters. Maya wrapped up her speech. The audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Tears welled up in her eyes as she scanned the room, overwhelmed by the support surrounding her. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel proud, not just of what she had accomplished, but of the collective momentum building around her. After her speech, Maya spent hours engaging with attendees during breakout sessions and networking events. Many approached her to express gratitude, sharing their own experiences of discrimination and thanking her for validating their pain. One woman, a Latina mother named Elena, recounted being stopped by security guards while shopping at a high-end store simply because she didn't look like she belonged. Another man, a South Asian college student named Raj, described being pulled over repeatedly by police officers who claimed he fit the description of someone they were looking for. Each story reinforced Maya's belief that no one should have to endure such indignities. Yet hearing them also filled her with hope. These weren't just isolated incidents. They were threads woven into a tapestry of shared resilience. Together, these voices formed a powerful narrative demanding change. Later that evening, Maya attended a private dinner hosted by the conference organizers. Seated at a long table adorned with candles and fresh flowers, she found herself surrounded by influential figures, politicians, activists, philanthropists, all eager to discuss next steps. The conversation turned to policy reform, with several guests proposing initiatives to address racial profiling within law enforcement. Maya listened attentively, chiming in when appropriate. Training programs are important, she said, but they're not enough. We need transparency, body cameras, independent oversight committees, regular audits of policing practices. Without accountability, nothing will truly change. Her comments resonated with the group, sparking lively debate about practical solutions. By the end of the meal, plans were underway to draft legislation aimed at increasing police accountability and promoting community engagement. Maya left the dinner feeling optimistic, knowing that tangible progress was within reach. Back home later that night, Maya sat alone in her living room, replaying the day's events in her mind. The applause, the stories, the discussions, they all reminded her of the power of collective action. But as she reflected, she couldn't ignore the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Being a voice for change came with challenges, both emotional and physical. There were days when she felt drained, when the criticism and negativity threatened to overwhelm her. Yet even in those moments, Maya refused to give up. She reminded herself why she had started this journey, to ensure that no one else had to endure what she had outside her mansion that night, to create a world where everyone could live without fear of judgment based on their race, gender, or background. As she prepared for bed, Maya glanced at the framed deed sitting on her desk, the same document that had silenced the officer's doubts months ago. It symbolized more than ownership. It represented her determination to claim her place in a world that often tried to push her aside. With a soft smile, she turned off the light, ready to face whatever tomorrow held. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fight for justice. But for tonight, Maya chose to rest, knowing she had planted seeds of hope that would continue to grow long after the headlines faded. The months following the national conference brought significant changes, not just for Maya, but for the communities she had inspired. Her speech had ignited a fire in people's hearts, motivating them to take action in ways both big and small. From grassroots movements to policy reforms, the momentum was undeniable. Yet Maya knew that true progress required sustained effort, not fleeting enthusiasm. As winter gave way to spring, she found herself at the center of a growing network of advocates determined to create lasting change. One crisp morning, Maya received an email from the police department that had once questioned her ownership of her home. It was an official update on the disciplinary actions taken against the officers involved in the incident. While details were limited due to privacy laws, the message confirmed that both men had undergone mandatory bias training and were placed under supervision for 6 months. Additionally, the department announced plans to implement body cameras for all officers within the next year, a direct result of public pressure spurred by Maya's advocacy. Reading the email, Maya felt a mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also a lingering sense of caution. The measures were steps in the right direction, but they weren't enough to undo decades of systemic racism. Still, she chose to view the developments as victories, however small. Every policy change, every acknowledgement of wrongdoing, brought society closer to accountability, and accountability was the foundation of trust. That same week, Maya hosted a community event at her mansion. She had transformed the grand ballroom into a welcoming space filled with round tables, colorful banners, and vibrant floral arrangements. Local residents, activists, and leaders gathered to celebrate the progress made so far and discuss future initiatives. The atmosphere buzzed with optimism as attendees shared stories of success, challenges overcome, and dreams yet to be realized. Maya stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with warmth and gratitude. "When I first moved here," she began, "I never imagined my arrival would spark such a powerful movement. But here we are, standing together, united in our commitment to justice and equality. This isn't just about me or my experience. It's about all of us working toward a better tomorrow." She paused, scanning the room. Faces lit up with smiles, eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she continued. "It takes courage, persistence, and collaboration. And while we've accomplished so much already, there's still work to be done. Let's keep pushing forward, together." Her words earned a standing ovation, followed by heartfelt applause. Afterward, guests mingled, exchanging ideas and forming connections. Parents swapped tips on raising socially conscious children, educators discussed inclusive curricula, and young activists brainstormed creative ways to engage their peers. For Maya, seeing this diverse group come together was a testament to the power of unity. In the weeks that followed, Maya expanded her efforts beyond Oakwood Estates. She partnered with schools, libraries, and community centers to host workshops focused on racial literacy and allyship. These sessions weren't lectures. They were interactive dialogues designed to foster understanding and empathy. Participants engaged in role-playing exercises, watched documentaries highlighting real-life struggles, and participated in open discussions about privilege and bias. One particularly memorable session took place at a local high school. Teenagers packed the auditorium, eager to learn but also skeptical. Many had grown up hearing platitudes about equality without seeing tangible proof of progress. Maya understood their hesitation and tailored her approach accordingly. Instead of lecturing, she asked questions. "Have you ever felt judged for something you couldn't control? Have you witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race or background?" Hands shot up across the room, and soon students were sharing personal anecdotes about being teased for their accents, profiled in stores, or excluded from social circles. Maya listened intently, nodding and validating their experiences. When it was time for her to speak, she didn't offer solutions outright. Instead, she encouraged the teens to think critically about how they could challenge stereotypes and support one another. By the end of the session, several students approached Maya to thank her. One girl, a shy sophomore named Mia, whispered, "I didn't know anyone cared about these things until today. Thank you for making me feel heard." Maya smiled softly, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. "You deserve to be heard," she replied. "Don't ever forget that." As summer approached, Maya turned her attention to legislative advocacy. Alongside civil rights organizations, she lobbied lawmakers to pass bills aimed at increasing police transparency and reducing racial profiling. Testifying before state legislators wasn't easy. It required hours of preparation, countless meetings, and unwavering resilience. But Maya refused to back down, knowing that policy changes could have widespread impact. Her hard work paid off when a landmark bill was signed into law in late June. Dubbed the Accountability and Transparency Act, it mandated the use of body cameras by law enforcement officers statewide, established independent oversight committees to investigate misconduct, and allocated funding for community policing programs. The victory was celebrated widely, with news outlets praising Maya's leadership and dedication. Despite the triumph, Maya remained humble. During interviews, she consistently redirected praise to the collective effort behind the achievement. "This isn't my win, it's ours," she told reporters. Every person who spoke out, signed petitions, or attended rallies played a part in making this happen. Together, we showed what's possible when we stand united. Amidst her advocacy work, Maya also carved out time for self-care. She had learned the hard way that burnout was real and dangerous. To recharge, she took long walks through the neighborhood, practiced yoga in her sunlit study, and spent weekends gardening in her backyard. Nature became her sanctuary, a place where she could reflect on her journey and find peace amidst the chaos. One afternoon, as she tended to her rose bushes, Maya reflected on how far she had come. From the night outside her mansion to the national stage, her life had transformed in ways she never anticipated. She thought about the challenges she faced, the skepticism, the criticism, the emotional toll, but also the victories, friendships, and moments of joy. Above all, she felt proud, not just of what she had achieved, but of who she had become. By fall, Maya's influence extended beyond her local community. She was invited to speak at international forums, collaborate with global human rights organizations, and mentor emerging activists. Her story resonated with audiences worldwide, inspiring others to confront injustices in their own countries. Despite the demands of her growing platform, Maya stayed grounded, always prioritizing authenticity over fame. On a cool October evening, Maya stood on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air carried the scent of fallen leaves, crisp and earthy. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a world free from prejudice, a world where everyone could live without fear of judgment based on the color of their skin. It was a lofty dream, perhaps, but one worth striving for. Maya knew the road ahead would be challenging, fraught with obstacles and setbacks. But she also knew that change started small, with acts of courage, conversations that challenged norms, and hearts willing to listen. As darkness fell, Maya stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities, to push for justice. But for tonight, she chose to savor the peace around her, knowing she had planted seeds of hope that would continue to grow long after the headlines faded. And for Maya Johnson, that was a victory worth celebrating.